Sir, for the next few years, your strategies, your plan?
Well, if you look at the global economy, one of the things about the global economy is that I've now been in the position almost 4.5 years, and there has yet to be a single time when I have adjusted upwards our estimates of global growth. Each time we've been estimating it downwards, and once again for 2016. We think it's going to grow 2.4% and probably not much better next year. Somewhat better, but not much better next year. So 2.4. The thing that worries us the most is that right now there are more developing countries in recession than at any time since 2009. So it's a mixed picture in the sense that commodity exporters are doing very poorly. The overall growth rate of commodity exporters is around 0.4%. Commodity importers are doing relatively better, growth at around 5.6%. Of course, Bangladesh is doing well compared to most countries, well over 6%, close to 7%. And so when we look at the current situation, we have to really think, how can the World Bank Group play a role in stimulating economic growth? How can the World Bank play a role in preparing economies for the future, no matter what the economy, the future might look like? And we also find ourselves having to be very involved in helping countries become more resilient to things like climate change and refugees and even pandemics like we saw with Ebola. So in three major areas, boosting economic growth, investing in people, Bangladesh has done a great job investing in people so that countries can be prepared for whatever the economy might bring, and finally helping countries to build resilience. In Bangladesh, the major issue is building resilience to climate change, which is one of the biggest issues that Bangladesh has to face. So that's what we do. We have two goals: end extreme poverty, boost shared prosperity, and three major ways to get there: economic growth, and because the amount of aid dollars is actually going to be going down over the next few years. We think boosting economic growth has to really focus on private sector resources. Second, invest in people, invest in human beings, and the third is resilience. So that's what we're doing. Two goals, three ways to get there.
Right? So, in the global perspective, how do you see Bangladesh? How is doing? What is your plan for the next few years? To how we are going to plan, support, and working together with Bangladesh?
So what in my speech and conversations today, we're really focusing on Bangladesh's tremendous success in lifting people out of poverty. The poverty rate has dropped pretty dramatically. We'll get you the numbers from our numbers from the speech, but it's dropped dramatically, and over 20 million people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. So in that sense, Bangladesh has done well. Also, in many areas, like compared to its neighbors, compared to other countries,
even India, even Pakistan,
India, they've done very well in terms of healthcare, education, done especially well in terms of involving women, increasing the number of women in the workforce. So on many levels, Bangladesh has done very, very well. I've been a great admirer of Brock for many, many years. Sir Faisal Abed is a friend of mine, and watching what he and the government have been able to do together between NGOs and the government in terms of scaling up some extremely effective programs. These are some of the best experiences in the world. And yet Bangladesh still suffers from things like, for example, very low rates of foreign direct investment. Now, over the last few years, foreign direct investment has gone up, but it's still only 1.7% of Bangladesh GDP. And Vietnam, for example, is 6%, over 6% of GDP. So there is still room for Bangladesh to move. There's been political uncertainty, we know that, and when you're looking at foreign direct investment, political uncertainty is not good. I mean, people want a stable, predictable government with rules and regulations that are rational and that companies can rely on.
So there is another problem. It is not only a problem of Bangladesh. It is regional, it is global. The terrorism.
Yes.
And recently, Bangladesh have got events, and one of the biggest, where 22 people are killed ours. And previously, we used to know that in the poorer section of the people, uneducated people, they want to join the extremism. But now we find in Bangladesh, educated family, young boys, students of the private, bigger universities, and from the well-to-do families, they are joining. So it's a challenge, and of course our government is doing well up to now. How do you see how to face, and that is also a challenge because the foreign direct investments, they need a peaceful country.
Right.
So how do you see from
Well,
that point of view?
You know, the thing is now, terrorism is just, it's affecting every country, everywhere. You know, Brussels, Paris, even Orlando in the United States. I mean, the terrorist acts, whether it's the so-called lone wolf or, in this case, a group of relatively elite young people, you know, from Bangladesh. So we welcome Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's zero tolerance approach to terrorism. But I can just tell you, this is a huge problem for so many countries in the world that we didn't think would be affected, like places like Brussels and Paris. But now it's a problem for so many countries in the world, and I think the most important thing is for there to be much higher levels of cooperation and coordination. And the good news is that it's happening. That the way that in fact, the OECD countries, U.S., France, Belgium, the way that they're now sharing information is much better than before. I think the sophistication with which they're monitoring potential terrorist acts is getting better. But this is an enormous problem. It takes very little for a person to wreak havoc.
So do you think that you have any role to play in this?
Well, our role is to constantly look at trying to decrease fragility, decrease the chances for conflict. We were not involved in responding to refugee crises before, but now I think the recognition is that in situations of fragility and conflict that could soon lead to terrorism, that could soon lead to the movement of refugees into other parts of the world, like for example in Europe. Now what has happened is that our member countries have asked us to get involved. So we're now trying to, for example, create special economic zones in Jordan that would benefit both Jordanians and Syrian refugees. Now this is different, and we don't know what the direct connection to terrorism is. We know that there's no simple explanation for terrorism. But in many of the Middle Eastern countries I go to, what they tell me is very high rates of unemployment among young people. The highest rates of unemployment in Tunisia are among college-educated young people. So from our perspective, what we need to do is work with Tunisia to quickly stimulate the economy, create jobs so that the unemployment rates among college-educated young people begins to come down. Because that's a recipe for fragility, for conflict, and perhaps even terrorism.
Mr. President, as you mentioned about Tunisia, here also educated unemployment is quite high. That's also a big challenge for us.
So creating jobs is, of course, the top priority of quite literally just about every country in the world. Every country in the world. Bangladesh, I think there are some 2 million new entrants to the job market every year. It's a huge number of young people. And so as we look around the world, and so this gets directly to the first part of our approach. Remember, two goals, 3 ways to get there. So in order to grow the economy, to create the kinds of jobs that would provide hope and optimism for all of these young people, you need to attract investment from the private sector. And attracting investment from the private sector, the reason for that is because, first of all, the private sector can bring with it lots of new ideas, new technology, new ways of managing that will be good for Bangladesh. But there's also a unique opportunity in the sense that this low growth, low interest rate environment has led to many holders of capital earning very, very little interest on the capital they're doing. So, for example, there's estimated to be more than $10 trillion of sovereign funds that are held in negative interest rate bonds. So in other words, you give somebody your money and you pay them to hold your money for you. You don't get anything back. And so because of that situation, there's a potential opportunity to attract those investors to places like Bangladesh. Right now, foreign direct investment in Bangladesh is low because of uncertainty, because of a sense of political instability, but also because they're not sure that the regulatory environment is predictable enough for them. They're not sure that as they go into a situation like investing in Bangladesh, that over a 10 to 15-year period, their investments will be safe and productive. Right? So I think that some of it is a misperception by the outside world, but some of it is that the government has real work to do. And the government knows it has real work to do. But these so-called structural reforms, especially around the business environment, there is a race in the world to get better. I mean, everyone's trying to get better. Prime Minister Modi next door is working extremely hard to improve the business environment in India. Right. He is aggressively looking for opportunities to improve the business environment. And so are the people in Vietnam, so are the people in Pakistan, everyone in your neighborhood. Indonesia, we're working very closely with the Indonesian government. So Bangladesh needs to do the same thing. It needs to look around and see what's happening in the neighborhood and then do what it takes to improve the business.
So, there is a debate going on, not very strongly, as South Asian countries are improving, developing, going very fast. So there is a question of the development, question of the democracy. So there is a debate in Bangladesh also that we need development fast and democracy later. So do you want to respond on this? How do you think?
Well, the thing is, we're not a political organization.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we work with many different kinds of government. Right? We believe in human rights, and we've now incorporated human rights into our safeguards. We believe in non-discrimination. We believe in the rights of workers to organize. We are against child labor. So we have now incorporated into our safeguards very clear position on non-discrimination and rights. So that's our position. We think that that democratic systems are the right ones because they assure that people have rights. But we also are not an organization that comments on the political structures of governments. The governments we work with have many different kinds of political structures. Right? Our role is economic development. That's right. Our role is economic development. In the context of the projects that we lend for, we have very clear commitments around rights, and we will stick to those.
Thank you. And the next question for you, we know is, please don't take it otherwise, there was some problem with the World Bank with the Bangladesh government. Now it's good that you came and you're coming. Bangladesh is open, that you are giving every support and everything. How do you think about the situations about which has happened a few years back regarding a project where World Bank took a positions, Bangladesh Bank, Bangladesh, there was a reaction of the government and people of Bangladesh. Do you want to say anything on that?
Why don't you tell me what you're talking about?
For the bridge project. I don't want to mention that. It would be good if you say something positively. We don't want to do anything negative.
So we understand the development impact of the Prothom Bridge. It is opening up an entire section of the country, so that we understand the importance of it. And we now are in full communication with the government because they're beginning the process of going forward on the Prothom Bridge. So we understand the importance of it. As we look back at what happened, there are important lessons that I think both sides have learned. But now we want to look forward, and the way we look forward is to say, okay, so maybe we didn't use World Bank funds for the Prothom Bridge, but we've used it for many other really important things. And in fact, Bangladesh continues to be the #1 recipient of IDA funds, our Fund for the Poorest Country. It's the #1 recipient. And we will continue to invest heavily in Bangladesh because it's important. And the country, again, has made many advances. And so on this trip, I'm announcing 3 different funds. One for childhood stunting, undernutrition, another for adapting to climate change, and a third, a trust fund, so that we can take the lessons from Bangladesh in health and education and women's involvement, take the lessons from Bangladesh and spread them to other parts of the world. So a trust fund specifically to learn the lessons from Bangladesh and take them to other parts of the world. So there's 3 major things that we're announcing just on this trip. And I would just put it this way. I would say that that we're Bangladesh is an extremely important partner for us. And the reason I'm coming here on this trip is first and foremost to celebrate End Poverty Day and to celebrate Bangladesh's great successes. Now here, as I've spoken with the government officials, we've both been extremely supportive of the positive outcomes, but then we've also had discussions about the things that still need to be done.
I have a question about the corruption issue. That's a big problem in this region. But in the past,
This is everywhere in the world.
Yes.
But now it is we are just talk about corruption. Is there any shift in your position?
So you want to say that we discussed this issue, about the issue of corruption, transparency. So World Bank is not that vocal as it was before. It is true or no?
But I don't know. So yes, I heard that there is absolutely no change in our position on corruption. I have said again and again and again that we have zero tolerance for corruption. We've started with that position, and we will not bend from that position. When we have found corruption, we've reacted very, very quickly. We continue to debar companies, meaning making it, preventing them from doing business with the World Bank if we find that they're involved in corruption. We actually took a case to the Canadian court, and we won that case. And it showed that our position on debarring these companies was completely justified. So we continue to do that work. We continue to move aggressively on corruption, and we will continue to.
What is that
There's
case?
no change.
What is that case?
It was a particular company in Canada that took a case to court, arguing that what we were doing was unconstitutional, and the court decided that no, it was not unconstitutional at all, and they upheld our debarment.
Thank you. So I want 3 sentences. Your wish for the people of Bangladesh. One sentence.
Well, my wish for the people of Bangladesh is that that they go through rapidly the stages of development that not only Bangladeshi people but everyone wants to. Today at the session, I told a story about growing up in Korea. I lived in South Korea for the first 5 years of my life, and in those first 5 years, Korea was an extremely poor country, extremely poor, and there at one point it was thought that Korea would have no hope of developing as a fully developed country. They didn't even qualify for World Bank loans because they were so poor. But now look where Korea is now. And I would just say to the Bangladeshi people, never give up hope. Continue to do everything you can to educate yourself and your children. Prepare for an economy in the future that we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how automated it will be. We don't know how much artificial intelligence and robotics is going to affect the future. So the most important thing is to focus on the education and well-being of you, your children, and your entire family. Prepare for a future whose dimensions we may not completely understand.
Wish for the government of Bangladesh.
Well, I think the government of Bangladesh over the last 3 decades has accomplished enormous amounts since 1991 in terms of lifting people out of poverty. But I think that going from now to its goal of becoming a middle-income country by 2021, ending extreme poverty by 2030, they're going to have to continue on the path of very serious, very difficult structural reforms. Things like improving the business environment, improving the quality and effectiveness of education and healthcare, making sure that all Bangladeshis have access to the kinds of services that they want to have, taking action on climate change. So there's many challenges for the government, but what the final message from us is that we want to be the best possible partner for the people and the government of Bangladesh.
Wish for the media of Bangladesh. last question.
This is on the record.
that you maintain your freedom and that you continue to speak freely and directly about the people, the government, and even institutions like the World Bank.
Thank you very much.
Did you have some questions?
Last question.
We have to get going.
One question.
This is the last question. This is the first visit in Bangladesh, and today is the second day. What did you like most in the Bangladesh, and what did not?
What did I like most about it? Well, let me tell you what made the biggest impression on me. You don't really get a sense for how many people are in Bangladesh until you come here. 17 million people in Dhaka, and in a very small land, there's 160 million people. So I was impressed that with such intense numbers of people, even people living in poverty, that things still worked. That things, this is a country that has adjusted to having 160 million people on a very small piece of land, much of which is made of water, much of which is affected deeply by climate change. So just the fact that things are functioning in such a difficult environment is very impressive to me. And I think the second thing that was really impressive is that in certain areas of social services, some of the things that BRAC started that were scaled up by the government, and even things like Bcash. I visited the Bcash company.
Very impressive.
Some
Very
of the
successful.
greatest innovations that are happening in the developing world are happening in Bangladesh. So this is an extremely challenging environment. To have the flooding that you do, to be as vulnerable to climate change as you are, to have a landmass that you have with so many people without a huge urban infrastructure. Korea is more crowded, but they have built upwards, as you know, right? And for it to be this crowded and then to have so many innovations, I think that's what really has struck me.